This week, Dr. Anthony Fauci went to Capitol Hill. He was compelled to go there based on a United States Senate subpoena issued by Rand Paul and the committee that he chairs. Well, there's a lot of pent-up angst over the COVID pandemic, the coronavirus, and the injection that many Americans took in the way of the vaccine. I think there's a lot of pent-up anger on the behalf of the American people. Anthony Fauci has set himself up as the perfect escape valve, pressure release valve, not only for the American people, but also for the United States Senate. I never trusted Anthony Fauci. I said so publicly on forums. I took a lot of heat for it, but I was very adamant that I did not believe him, that my instinct was that he was not telling the truth. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, because he originally told the American people that the coronavirus came from a bat cave 2 hours away from the Wuhan lab. Oh no, then it wasn't a bat cave, it was a wet market near the bat cave that the coronavirus came from. Oh no, then a whistleblower from the Wuhan lab, a doctor, spoke up and said that they were working on gain-of-function research in the development of a coronavirus. Who would do that? Who in their right mind would do that? I didn't understand it then. I don't understand it now. But meanwhile, Anthony Fauci went before the United States Senate. This was back in 2000, and got in a very heated argument with Rand Paul where they basically called each other liars on national television. Well, I felt then that Anthony Fauci was the liar. He denied working on or funding the Wuhan lab. He denied funding research on gain-of-function viruses, and it turned out to be a complete and utter lie. He knew it then, and he knows it now. He knows that he's been exposed, he's been outed because Bobby Kennedy Jr. somehow, I assume that someone blew the whistle to him, that Fauci, this just shows you how arrogant this man is, or how incompetent he is. I actually think it's probably a function of both. And what a consummate Washington bureaucrat he is. Folks, I've been telling you for 4 years on this show that I felt that there was a cancer inside our federal government. It is a cancer comprised of evil people doing evil things. I've related it primarily to the alphabet agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and now we can add the NIH, the National Institute of Asthma and Health, I think is the name of it. NIH, I think is the acronym that they use. Governments have to use acronyms. So they asked Fauci to come. He wouldn't come, so they subpoenaed him. And when he got there, it was he made a mockery of it. He sat there glum, smug. He was, to me, he was mocking the proceeding, and at a couple of points, he actually smiled. If he thought that he was above all of this, is the way that it came across to me. I'm sorry, I've just never been a fan of Fauci. I'm less of I'm hold him in contempt today. And there's good reason for that. So let's start with the opening of the proceeding by Senator Rand Paul, chairman of the committee.
When you defended this research, you described its benefits in the broadest terms. But when Congress demanded accountability, you hid behind the narrowest possible definition. You can't have it both ways. Your conduct concerning federal records raises further questions. It is a crime to destroy federal records. Yet our investigation reveals your assistant diligently reported that she deleted tons of emails. In 2024, you testified that you did not delete federal records. Who's telling the truth, you or your assistant? The committee has obtained repeated instructions from you telling federal officials to delete communications. On February 2nd, 2020, one day after Origin's call, you told Francis Collins, please delete this email after you read it. The committee asked for your voluntary cooperation to come today. Your appearance had to be compelled by subpoena. You're here today under duress. You're here today because of the court ordering it. President Biden issued you a sweeping pardon extending back to 2014, the same pardon he gave to his son Hunter. A pardon may protect a person from criminal prosecution, doesn't rewrite history. It does not erase documents. It does not convert a misleading statement into a truthful one. And it does not prevent Congress from establishing what happened. There will be another pandemic. There will be another crisis. And there will again be officials who insist that uncertainty must be hidden for the public's own good. They will demand obedience. They will invoke science. I am the science, as though it were a commandment. They will argue that government officials cannot be questioned because questioning them would undermine public trust. They have it backwards. It is secrecy that destroys trust. It is arrogance that destroys trust. It is censorship that destroys trust. And it is the refusal to admit error that destroys trust. That loss of trust may be your most damaging legacy. Trust can't be ordered. It has to be earned. No scientist is above scrutiny. No government official is beyond accountability. And no public servant has the right to treat the suffering of millions of Americans as a footnote to his preferred version of history.
Boy, Rand Paul laid it on him. And, you know, I thought the whole time I was watching the proceedings on Wednesday of this week that Fauci was had gotten the worst advice of any public servant I've ever seen. You know, the American people, and look, I've been a political scientist legitimately since 1976 when I earned my political science degree from Ohio Wesleyan University. I have been active in politics my entire life and have been active as well in my adult life. I was a officer of the Georgia Republican Party in the late 80s. I was a candidate for the state Senate in 2018. I was a candidate for Attorney General of Georgia in 2022. I ran with President Trump's endorsement. I was a political reporter for Georgia Public Television in the early 90s. I really have been in and around politics my entire life. I know politics. Folks, I've never seen anyone excoriated like Anthony Fauci was in that hearing earlier this week. There was one point, very briefly, mind you, that I've started to feel a little sorry for him because I felt that the punishment and the way he was being treated was so severe. I mean, there was a piece of me that said, look, the American people are still really mad about COVID, and understandably and deservedly so. And that I thought that it was just a fleeting moment. Don't misinterpret this. That I started thinking, well, they're just picking Fauci as the scapegoat. That's not what I thought. The thought entered my mind for a brief second. But here's the problem. Fauci had an opportunity. He's had multiple opportunities to avoid becoming the fall guy. But he's not really the fall guy. He is being brought before the Homeland Security and Governmental Oversight Committee because of his arrogance, his lies, his law breaking. Yes, his law breaking. You don't pardon someone who hasn't broken laws. We can start with that. But he is continuing to break laws. And he's going to be his own worst enemy. But the point I was trying to get to is that I have watched politics my whole life. And I've watched life my whole life, especially in this country. And it is my belief that the American people are very forgiving, that they are very understanding, that they value contrition. Fauci's lawyers should give him their money back. Well, that's a good question. Who is paying Fauci's lawyers? This one guy, David Schertler, he is a white-collar criminal defense lawyer in Washington, D.C. He represented the Menendezes. You know, that was the senator from New Jersey and his wife who took gold from a foreign country. You'll hear more about that in a little bit. He's also defended an NFL player and other people that have committed white-collar crimes. He makes $1,500 an hour. Now, Fauci's got some scratch. According to Josh Hawley, he's worth $12 million. But regardless, $1,500 an hour, that goes pretty quick. And why would you hire somebody at that rate? But they said in the hearing, Rand Paul says in the hearing, that he had a half a dozen lawyers. And I can tell you, those people, they just are not cheap. So that hearing yesterday or on Wednesday with Schertler just by himself, just take 4 hours. That's $6,000 plus probably $6,000 to get ready. I'm thinking the hearing cost him just for that one lawyer $15,000 to $20,000. Now there are 5 more lawyers who were sitting around the table and behind Fauci. He must feel like he's very important. He had his own security guard. You know, the Capitol Hill police guarded the door. There are magnetometers in the Capitol. You can't get in unless you pass through a magnetometer and varying levels of security all the way into the committee room. I worked on the Hill when I first got out of college, and I know what the security is like around the Capitol. It actually in 1976, it was nothing like it is today. It was actually pretty lax. I mean, you could walk in and you could go pretty much anywhere except on the floor of the House or the Senate. I mean, you could walk into the Speaker of the House's office. You could walk into any congressman or senator's office to their reception area. The security was not tight at all, but it has gotten that way today, unfortunately, because of the world that we live in today is so much dramatically different than it was 50 years ago. But I'm just saying the point I was trying to get to, Fauci could have taken another tack. He could have come into that committee and said, look, I have a lot of regrets about the pandemic. There are a lot of people who have volunteered to play Monday morning quarterback. And many of their criticisms and complaints were very well founded. In my own defense, I would just say that for 30 years, I have served this country diligently, patriotically, and with dedication to my job. But I had never been confronted with a global pandemic. And I wish I had made a lot of decisions differently. I relied on the best advice that I could get from some of the nation's top physicians and doctors and institutions like the CDC. Oh yeah, he caused that guy to get fired, didn't he? Gosh, the details facts are really stubborn, aren't they? But he could have made that argument and he could have said that our federal government was ill prepared to have handled a pandemic of this magnitude that was unplanned, unrehearsed, and unprecedented. And that they knew that there was no science that legitimized masking. There was no data that supported 6-foot social distancing. That they did not have clinical trials to validate the vaccine, and that they were just making up the rules as they went along, and that they were doing so in good faith, using the best evidence and the best guesses that collectively they could pull together. Now, a lot of people would have had a lot of problems with that, but boy, do I think it would have been a lot better than pleading the Fifth Amendment 111 times. It became so disingenuous. Now, stay with us until the end. This isn't going to go long. We're going to get to the point here very quickly, and you'll see. But just stick with us till the end, and you'll see exactly where I'm coming from. So Rand Paul had more to say here. Watch this.
Kevin Esvelt, who's a CRISPR scientist at MIT, also wrote about this gain of function. I implore every scientist, funder, and nation working in the field, please stop. No more trying to discover or make pandemic-capable viruses. No more experiments likely to disseminate blueprints for plagues. Dr. Fauci, would you like to at least answer this one question for us today and let us know whether or not you've changed your mind on whether or not the benefits of gain-of-function research outweigh the risks?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
The chairman has denied your assertion of privilege and directed you to answer, but you nonetheless refuse and stand on privilege despite the existence of the pardon. The committee will have to consider after this hearing what appropriate action should be taken against you for the failure to testify after being directed to do so. It's against the law to obstruct an investigation of Congress. There will be repercussions to your refusal to testify today.
In other words, the knives are out. They're going to go for him. And I am not disappointed. I have sat here for 4 years and told you that this federal government is rotten to its core. And here is the poster child for the swamp and for the rottenness that inflicts our own federal government. This guy, we've got his diaries now, and he's written all these self-serving, beautiful platitudes for himself, acknowledging and saying that he has become a United States celebrity. People are lining up to get his photograph taken with them. They want a selfie, take it with Anthony Fauci, that he's in communication with celebrities like Jake Tepper, who he put into his diary that he'd gone over to Jake Tepper and his wife's house for dinner, and that they were going to come back to his house for dinner, that he was in contact with Barbara Streisand, and that he told her he was listening to her music when he worked, and how flattered she was. And it just makes you nauseous if it were just an ordinary kind of a context. But what makes it so damning and despicable is he should have been writing about the tragedies that were affecting our nation and our citizens. I personally know 8 people, 8, I can name them, who died of COVID or COVID-related deaths. It's tragic. It was tragic. It affected me deeply. 2 of them were my very, very good friends. In those cases, both of them had taken all of the shots and the booster. They both effectively died from strokes shortly after taking the booster. And here's this guy who tells you that he acted because of the science. And then we find out it was just a big lie. It was just one big lie. Because his own diary and his own emails and whistleblowers came forward and said there was no science. There was no science for masking. There was no science for social distancing. There was not adequate science for the vaccine. There was no science. He lied to us while calling everyone else a liar. He also caused people to be censored. He also caused people to lose their job, including members of our own armed services who did not want to take the vaccine. Hell, I didn't want to take it. I did not think that I could be manipulated. I did not think I could be the subject of peer pressure. But one of my clubs, a mile from where I'm sitting, would not allow me in the front door unless I had proof of a vaccine. Was I out of my mind? I should have told him to go to hell. Give me my money back. I'm not coming in the club. And it turned out that I would have been right. And there were friends of mine who did just that, who just said, okay, if that's the rule, I'm just not coming. And they didn't. And they're better off of it for it today, I'm sure. So there's just a lot of anger on the part of all Americans about the coronavirus and the vaccine and the censorship, the loss of jobs, and the loss of lives, the loss of 2 years of a child's life during their developmental stages when they couldn't go to school and they couldn't socialize. It's just like that year is missing, and they're not going to reclaim it. They're not going to reclaim it. So you just add it all up, and it was based on a lie. And not until this past week have I been willing to say what I suspect. And I do suspect today, particularly after President Trump's address to the nation 2 weeks ago when he divulged that China had interfered with our 2020 election, the Democrats and China and other parts, members of our own federal government, a lot of them in high places, like Fauci, who colluded with Birx to try and make Trump look bad. We're all in on it. I don't believe that they were coordinated necessarily, but they may have been. But they were all in on it, and it was to get Trump. I do believe today, I don't believe, I suspect, I have a high level of suspicion that the coronavirus was intentionally released on the world. I say that because the Chinese government, the Chinese culture appears to put a low value on human life, unless you're talking about their own. I'm sure Chairman Xi wants to live, but he certainly didn't care about the genocide that he committed inside of China. So you just have to conclude that they don't put a high value on life, not for their citizens and certainly not for people in other places around the world. They were determined to get Trump, and they did. All the things that the coronavirus set up, almost wrecking our economy, taking 1 million lives out of the United States, it weakened us. And the doctor from the Wuhan lab who talked about it went missing the next day and has not been seen or heard of since. I suspect that she's been killed. When I look at all the consequences, but more importantly, all of the lies, especially from Anthony Fauci, and the manipulation, the coercion, the censorship, and that was all coordinated, and the media, their willingness to buy into this, and now, especially now, the Democrats' defense of a serial liar, Anthony Fauci? I think it was intentional. I suspect that this virus was unleashed on the world. That's what I suspect. And that's why I'm mad. That's why I'm angry. Well, it only got worse for Fauci. He was excoriated. I've sat through Watergate. I watched just about every Watergate hearing. I sat through the Iran-Contra hearings with Oliver North. I need to get a life. I need to get out more, but I just have been fascinated by developments and world events. And so I watched the hearing on Wednesday, and Fauci was excoriated like no one I have ever witnessed before or my entire political science lifetime have I ever seen anybody that has been gone for with such a vengeance. And folks, for once, if you listen to the program, I'm critical of John Kennedy, and I'm critical of Jim Jordan, and I'm critical of all these grandstanders who get up there and act tough and do nothing. But I'm telling you, folks, for the first time in a long time, I think we're about to see accountability. I think we might just get accountability on this go round, and it might be the first domino to fall. We can only hope. But just watch this. This is from Senator Scott from Florida. Let's roll Senator Rick Scott.
Here's how it impacted my family and people close to me. I have daughters with children. You can't imagine the questions they had around vaccines for their kids and themselves, and the pressure, the unbelievable pressure to make the right decision for their health. I can tell you pregnant women who worked with me were so scared because every time they went to the doctor, they were told something different about taking the vaccine. And you caused this. Imagine being a mom trying to protect their kids, or an expectant mother trying to figure out what to do. Every 3 weeks, a doctor tells you a new set of guidance on a vaccine. The haphazard information you released and pushed on the American people with little research is appalling, and why there's so much distrust in our institutions today. That trust is crucial to public health, and you, more than any person or event in my lifetime, have destroyed that trust for millions of Americans. You lied to hundreds of millions of people amid the worst public health crisis in a century. You failed to follow your own guidance. You forced people to watch their loved ones die alone over the phone. It's disgusting. You destroyed the federal government's credibility when it comes to public health. We have entire generations of Americans who, rightfully so, do not trust our institution to keep people safe because of you. This has destroyed decades of progress and lifetimes of work because you wanted to fuel your own ego and be the center of attention.
Yeah, he wanted to be a hero. He wanted to be a celebrity. He was on the front page of a magazine. People wanted selfies with him. Movie stars were calling him. He ate it up. And instead of writing in his diary how he had become a worldwide household name, he should have been writing in his diary that another person died of the coronavirus today. I can't sleep at night. I can't eat. I can't think about anything else except this horrible pandemic. And we're going to do everything in our power to arrest it and stop it and bring the American people full transparency and be honest with them. But no, he was working on grants to enrich himself and wallowing with self-pride in his newfound celebrity while he was being driven around Washington by a government-paid chauffeur. Yes, this federal government is rotten to its core. We need a cleansing. We should take no prisoners. Every person who works for the federal government who hates the United States and its people should be summarily fired and the cancer eradicated. Because that's what we've got. You think it's hyperbole? It is not hyperbole. The CIA killed the 35th president of the United States. Take that as a starting point. And they killed RFK and MLK. And I suspect they brought down Building 7. And I don't think that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk, or if he had anything to do with it, he certainly didn't act alone. And I do not believe that Thomas Matthew Crooks was the sole gunman in Butler, Pennsylvania. I think they all trace straight back to the deep state. And I think the deep state has been infected by the Israelis. I think we have a cancer growing in our federal government. It will never stop. It will never end until we show sunshine on what has occurred. Oh, and I left out one. Don't forget Epstein. I think it's all intel. I think it's all bureaucrats. I think it's all political greed and maybe money and control. These little people, Anthony Fauci suffers from a little man complex. Let's just be real. He is a little man, and as my mother used to say, he's a big shot out of a small pistol. That's what he is. And there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands more just like him that love to exert their power and control over you. And I'm tired of it. I know you are too. As you know, we don't put our name on anything that we haven't tried and believe in. So when I tell you about Nessa's Hemp, I want you to listen up. Nessa's Hemp is a Chicago-based company that makes hemp, and it was founded by Anessa. And what she's built is really something. We're talking about clean, high-quality hemp products with no gimmicks, just real ingredients, real transparency, with real results. Whether you're dealing with stress, sleep issues, inflammation, or you just want to add something natural to your wellness routine, Nessa's Hemp has something to offer you. Head over to nessahemp.com, that's N-E-S-A-S hemp.com, and check out what they've got. Use our promo code TRUTH for a discount just by being our listener. Look, it didn't get better for Fauci. It only got worse. Here is Senator Marino from Ohio. And by the way, I was one of his first donors. That's a fact. Here's Senator Marino.
All right, let me tell you who David Schertler is for the audience because he was ejected by the chairman. He's a high-profile criminal attorney. He's represented some really great people, like Senator Bob Menendez. Maybe that's somebody who my Democrat colleagues may remember took gold bars as bribes from the Egyptians. And there's an article here in the Washington Free Beacon that talks about why you would hire a guy like David Schertler. And the comment is, if you're in deep shit, that's who you call. Do you feel like you're in deep shit?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
So what Marino was talking about then was that high-powered Washington lawyer, David Schertler, was actually ejected from the hearing because he tried to insert himself. And he had been told before the hearing that he was not to sit in the roped off area. And he did. He did not honor the instruction. And he was also told that he could not participate in the hearing. And here's the exchange that he had with Senator Paul when he tried to speak. Can we run that tape, Anthony?
You're not recognized. You're not recognized. If you are unruly, you will be removed from the proceeding. You are not recognized, and you are not recognized, sir. Sir, you are not recognized. You are not recognized. Security, we'll hold off. but you will respect these proceedings. You were told not to sit at the table. You insist on sitting at the table, and we told you you would not be recognized. You are not invited here for testimony, sir. You are being disruptive. Would you behave this way in a courtroom? No, because the judge would put you in jail. I can't do that today, but I can have you escorted from the premises. So I would say, sir, sit quietly and don't say another word. I said, sit quietly. You are not recognized. Another word and you're gone.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear what the attorney has to say.
He is not recognized by the committee or the chair. If he speaks again, he will be removed from the room. This testimony is from Anthony Fauci. This is not a game with his lawyers. He can advise, his lawyers can give him advice. He's got a half dozen here. They're all allowed to talk to him.
Yes.
All right? Yeah. But the attorneys are not recognized. In fact, the attorney was told not to sit at the table, and he's not obeying that recommendation. There's a row behind you, sir. That's where you were told to sit, and you're not. And now you're disrupting the proceedings. And so, look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered, for a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room. Let the record state that Dr. Fauci will still have the advice of the other half a dozen attorneys that he brought along today.
It was a mockery. And you know what it conveyed? I don't know how you can conclude anything other than Fauci and his lawyers do not believe that the rules pertain to them, that he is somehow above the law, he is beyond reproach, and you can't touch him. Well, by God, they better touch him. I'm telling you, they better lock his ass in handcuffs, put him in an orange suit, and walk him prominently into the penitentiary. All right, well, we'll see whether that happens. Senator Moreno wasn't done yet. Here he is.
It is a total disgrace what you did to this country. And if my Democrat colleagues are standing there defending you, I hope the voters of the United States of America watch the clips of every one of you doting on a guy who was more interested in being a celebrity than saving American people.
That's a fact. And that's the question that I continue to ask myself. Why? Why would anyone defend him? Unless you were in on it. Well, John Fetterman, he did distance himself from the other Dems. Not by a big margin, but a little bit. Here he is from the hearing.
It's not about much more your regrets, but I have one. And that is early on that there was the theory that the virus could have emerged from the lab. And early on that became like a right-wing kinds of theory. And I thought it seemed to make sense. Now there was a really advanced lab that was close by, and then you have this unknown virus out. So, but that became a very partisan thing. And now it seems now it's more and more emerging theory that that would have come from the lab. Now, you know, I think that the next time our nation's facing something like this, we are not become, you know, as I might have been, blinded by the partisan idea that maybe the truth might come from a side that's different than you are. But I think we should really be willing to pursue truth, no matter where that may have emerged.
Well, thank you, John Fetterman, for that advertisement for our program, because that truly is what we search for every day and every week that we put this program up on the air. And we're so grateful to you who tune in and listen and write to us at johngordontruth@gmail.com. We always solicit and welcome your comments. We read them all and we respond to them all in one form or another, even if it's just an acknowledgement that we've read it with a thumbs up. But anyway, the hearing continued. It only got worse for Fauci. You know, there are not many people that I'm would really be intimidated by, but Josh Hawley, he's somebody I would never want to get on the wrong side of. Here he was in his dress down of Anthony Fauci earlier this week.
You remember Greg Folkers? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Your chief of staff is the answer. Do you remember Patricia Conrad? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
She was your personal assistant. And what were these individuals doing in the depth of the pandemic in November of 2020 when millions of Americans were suffering from COVID? What were they doing? I tell you what they're doing. Folkers was on your behalf soliciting and gathering information for a cash award. Let's look at it. We've got his email right here, right over my shoulder. Folkers says, I'm working on this nomination for the Dan David Award for Fauci. We need to beef up the COVID part. Do you have language in the can that you could share that delineates how we responded in new ways to COVID? He sends this to multiple federal employees. What was the Dan David Award? Do you remember, Doc?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
It was a $900,000 cash award. $900,000 cash award. And he got it because he used federal employees to get it. And this wasn't the only award, was it, Dr. Fauci? In fact, you applied for and received at least 8 other federal cash prizes on federal time using federal employees and federal resources. Here they are over my shoulder. Besides the Dan David Award, you've got the Partnership for Public Service, you've got the Adelson Prize, you've got the Smithsonian Award, you've got the National Academy of Medicine's Award, you've got the CDC Foundation. In fact, you turned your staff into a full-time application machine. You actually wrote to people and said, do you think maybe I'd qualify? And you got cash for all of this. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 employees, was it? In fact, you used 8 separate federal employees on federal time using federal resources to solicit cash awards. Isn't that true?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Here they are right over my shoulder. Here's all of them. The people that you use, federal employees, so that you could go and get cash money. And the most hilarious part is that you weren't content to even dragoon them into applying for all of these cash awards. You then had them go out to the ethics agencies and ethics watchdogs and demand that you be able to get the money. That's right. We've got it in your emails. Your staff and employees on federal time, using federal resources, being paid with federal dollars, are soliciting cash for you. And then they're turning around and saying to the agency, we don't want just an answer. We want to get to yes, because Fauci wants the money. He wants it. We want to get to yes, and yes takes time. This is your chief of staff again, using federal email to pressure the agency's own ethics people so that you could get money, so that you could get rich. And it violated the law, didn't it, Dr. Fauci? Didn't it? It violated the law, didn't it? It is a question. You can answer. Go ahead.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Federal law, as you very well know, prohibits the solicitation of cash awards or other personal benefits for federal employees. And it certainly prohibits using your own employees to do this.
I would have handled it differently if I were Dr. Fauci. Well, I would have handled it a lot differently. First of all, I would have never lied to Congress. Secondly, I would never have funded the Wuhan laboratory. Third, I would not have lied about it. Fourth, I would not get caught up in my celebrity, and I would not have tried to profit from a pandemic that I largely contributed to the occurrence of. But then when I got called before Congress, I would not have come with a platoon of lawyers. I would not have come with a security guard. I would have come by myself, and I would have laid my soul bare. And I would have said, I am so sorry. I don't sleep at night. I have no quality of life. My conscience is killing me because I made mistakes that could have saved lives. I made a pandemic worse. I didn't make it better. But I did what I thought was best based on the information that I got and the beliefs that I had. And maybe if he had worked as hard at rescuing the American people as he had on nurturing his media contacts and his relationships with celebrities, maybe it would have turned out differently for him and the country. But he didn't. He was focused on himself. And he was putting people in jail and causing them to lose their lives, causing them to get arrested for doing activities which he himself did without consequence. You couldn't have your aunt and uncle over for Thanksgiving, but he could go to Jake Tapper's house for dinner. You couldn't go to church, but he could have Jake Tapper and his wife over to his house to reciprocate for dinner. No, he's going down, folks. I'm telling you. And he deserves it. Had he come to this hearing and been contrite, transparent, and honest, I would have said, maybe we got it wrong. Maybe he was just dealing with an unprecedented pandemic and he was ill-equipped to do so. And maybe he got bad advice. But now I don't believe any of that. I think that he was an egomaniac of low character and that he was willing to lie and that he loved not his celebrity near as much as his power. He lost his mind. He was drunk with power, greed, and ego. Well, that's nothing new, folks. Hubris has been the downfall of great leaders since the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire. It's legion. It happens. It's a human condition requiring a lot of self-discipline not to fall prey to it. All right, so Josh, Holly wasn't done.
Well, nothing says honesty like taking the fifth, huh, Doc? Let's try something. What day of the week is it today?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie you're wearing?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color's the carpet in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Let's just get one thing straight. You don't have any rights under the Fifth Amendment because you've been pardoned, as you very well know. As the Supreme Court has been clear for a century and more, Brown versus Walker, 1896, when he has been pardoned, he may not stand upon his privilege. You know that. Your lawyers sitting behind you now shifting nervously in their chairs, they know it. This isn't about the Constitution. This isn't about the law. This is about contempt. Contempt for this body and contempt for the American people. But I think I know why you're doing it. It's because you don't want to answer questions. It's because you did all kinds of terrible things. It's because during the pandemic, you got rich, didn't you? You got rich while people were dying, hundreds of thousands of Americans, over 1 million in the end, and you were getting rich. And not only were you doing that, you were using federal employees with taxpayer money to apply for and solicit cash prizes for you personally, cash prizes totaling over $1 million. You did all of that during the pandemic, didn't you? That's a question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
I was sitting there watching the hearing, and I as God is my witness, I thought to myself, why doesn't somebody just ask him what day of the week it is? – There is no self-incrimination. in saying today's Wednesday. But Josh Hawley illustrated the point that that Fauci was so disingenuous, and they're trying to game their way through this through relying on legalities, and there are no legalities. Hawley is right. Brown versus Walker. If you have been pardoned, you can't incriminate yourself, except in the court of public opinion. And little Anthony could not allow his fragile ego to suffer that sort of accountability. I got bad news for him. Prison is not his worst fear, should not be. I think he has condemned his soul to a life of eternity in hell. And who could feel bad for him? I'm a pretty compassionate, sympathetic person. I've dug down into the bottom of my soul, and I can't find any sympathy for him. I can't. It could have turned out differently. He would have taken heat. Believe me, he would have taken heat if he had just come in and been honest and been real. And there would be no legal consequence. I don't think there would be any legal consequence. Now, I mean, he'd probably have to move to a foreign country under an assumed name to have any kind of quality of life. I think he's got a bullseye as big as you can paint it on the back of on the back of his body. And make no mistake, I am not calling for violence. I don't want violence. I abhor violence on any level. But I would be afraid if I were him. I don't think that guy behind him is adequate to protect him, because he is now exposed for who he really is, who he really was, and it wasn't a public servant for the American people. It was profiting, both reputationally and monetarily, and nurturing of his ego while people were dying and people were saying goodbye to loved ones over the telephone because they wouldn't be admitted into the hospital room based on Dr. Fauci's dictates. Now, here's what's going to happen, folks. Rand Paul telegraphed it. Let's watch what Senator Paul said in conclusion.
Let's be clear today, what we've seen. I really did want to hear from Dr. Fauci. I wanted to hear perhaps an apology, perhaps some semblance of being sorry for what happened or that judgment errors were made. We didn't hear any of that. But he was subpoenaed here to testify, refused to answer any questions, even after being directed by the chair and being advised of the law requiring him to do so. He has cited a privilege that is unsupported because of his blanket pardon and because he waived the privilege by testifying at the start. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to comply with the law, limited to the period of your pardon. At any point between January 1st, 2014 and January 19th, 2025, did you destroy any federal record or tell anyone else to?
Under the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given that you have a unlimited presidential pardon, what is your specific objection that you are making?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
My question was limited to the period of your pardon only. I find your objection unsupported and direct you to answer the question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Because you refuse to answer, citing a privilege that is unsupported because of your pardon, and after being denied to do so, this committee has scheduled a vote next week on a resolution certifying your contempt.
So that's what's going to happen. I don't know what Poly Market has it at. I would bet, wager 90 to 10 that he will be held in contempt of Congress, deservedly. And then as soon as that happens, a referral will be made to the United States Department of Justice, still headed by Todd Blanche, the interim director, the interim attorney general. And I believe that a grand jury will be convened, and I believe that he will be indicted for contempt of Congress. The penalty is 1 year in prison and a pretty hefty financial penalty. I think it's 10 grand, maybe 100,000. I'm not sure. It's pretty steep. And I think that he will be found guilty. I think that he will be put into an orange jumpsuit. And I think the national media will come out and show us him being escorted into the federal pen. And then I expect the Democrats to say that he's a political prisoner and that this was grandstanding and political retribution from the Republicans. How could they do that? How could Democrats support anyone as loathsome as this guy unless they were in on it? And that's what I suspect. I don't think we've gotten the truth yet. We've gotten a lot of it. But the one remaining question that no one is answering, tell me, write to me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. If you've heard anyone in the national media or any podcaster ask, was the virus intentionally released on the world? Just when I look at the links that they're going to cover it up and still put out disinformation, I have to ask the question, why? And my answer is that they are hiding something. And my suspicion is that it was an intentional, planned event to get Donald Trump to splinter this country, to weaken us as well it did. And that is the truth. And I'm John Gordon.